They said nothing bad ever happens in Pinewood, just quiet mornings and calm water on Pine Lake. But that morning the lake gave something back, a woman's body, and when I looked into her dead eyes, I saw the town's reflection staring back, cracked and full of lies. My name's Detective Claire Monroe, and this case, it's going to drown us all. The call came just after dawn. I was halfway through my second cup of black coffee when the dispatcher's voice crackled through the radio. Detective Monroe, we've got a body. Pine Lake? Fishermen found it tangled near the East Pier. Pine Lake. Even saying the name made my stomach twist. I'd grown up a few miles from that lake. It was the kind of place where summer kids came to fish and local teens went to get drunk. Nothing bad ever happened there until this morning. I grabbed my coat, the air biting cold as I stepped outside. The November fog hung low over the road, swallowing the town whole. Pinewood was a quiet little dot on the map of northern Maine, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone and gossip traveled faster than light. Murder didn't fit in here. Yet anyway, when I reached the lake, the sheriff's cruiser lights were already cutting through the mist. A cluster of deputies stood near the waterline. 2 fishermen, gray, bearded, flannel, waited by the dock, their eyes wide and pale as ghosts. Morning detective, Sheriff Dalton, greeted, voice rough as gravel. You're not gonna like this one. He wasn't wrong. The body was a woman mid-30s maybe, face swollen, hair floating like dark weeds in the cold lake water. She was wearing a red coat, the kind that would have looked bright and cheerful anywhere else. Out here, it looked like blood in the fog. I crouched near the shoreline, gloved hands steady. Her wrists were bound with fishing line, thin, sharp, and deliberate. Someone wanted her to sink, but not fast enough. Any ID? I asked. Yeah. Dalton held up a plastic bag. Inside, a soaked wallet and a driver's license. Name's Laura Kane, local. Runs that antique store on Maple Street. I knew her, not personally, but Pinewood wasn't big enough for strangers. I'd passed her shop a dozen times, Kane's Curios. She was quiet, polite, always with that distant, unreadable look. I stared at her body again, feeling the weight settle on my chest. Murder wasn't new to me. I'd seen my share in 15 years on the force, but something about this one. It felt personal. Get her to the morgue, I said quietly, and make sure the press stays out of this for now. Dalton nodded. You think this was random? No. I stood, eyes still on the rippling water. Someone wanted her found. By afternoon, I was back at the station, a mug of lukewarm coffee in hand and a file already building on my desk. Laura Kane, 30, 4, divorced, no kids, owned her shop for 5 years. No priors, no trouble, no enemies that anyone could name, except someone had tied her up and thrown her into a lake. I paged through the notes from the initial canvas. One witness had seen her leaving her shop around 8 last night. No one saw her again. I drove over to the antique store just before sunset. It closed. Signs swung lightly in the cold wind. Inside, dust clung to every surface. Rows of clocks ticked softly, their rhythms overlapping in a strange, haunting symphony. The smell of old wood and polish made me think of my mother's house before she died. I shook the thought away. Behind the counter, a half-empty cup of tea sat next to an open ledger. The last entry, November 5, sold jewelry box, $45C. Brant, I jotted the name down, a possible lead, then I noticed the back door locked, but the frame splintered slightly near the latch. Someone had forced it open. Damn. I whispered, crouching to inspect. Muddy footprints led out toward the alley, small and narrow, like from a woman's shoe. But there were heavier prints, 2 men's boots overlapping hers. A struggle, then silence, then Pine Lake. Back at the precinct, the medical examiner's report came in. Cause of death, blunt force trauma to the skull. The binding happened after she was already dead. So whoever killed Laura wanted to stage the scene to make it look like something it wasn't. I stared at the photos, the bruises, the waterlogged hair, the faint defensive marks on her wrists. I'd seen hundreds of cases, but this one felt off, balanced like missing a stair in the dark. Dalton leaned against my desk. Found something else, Claire. Under her nails paint flakes, metallic blue. I frowned, like car paint, maybe, or something else. Lab's running tests. I turned the photo over and saw something that froze me. On Laura's wrist, faint but visible, was an old scar. A thin line, maybe from years ago, and I remembered where I'd seen it before. A photo. 3 years ago, during a missing persons case that went cold, a girl named Melissa Kane, Laura's younger sister, she'd vanished without a trace. Now Laura was dead. Coincidence? Not in my line of work. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window of my apartment, the town lights flickering through the mist. Pinewood looked peaceful from here, but I knew better. Every small town has secrets they just hide better. I poured another glass of whiskey and opened my notebook. Questions? Why kill Laura now? What happened to her sister Melissa, who is C? Brant, the name tugged at me. I'd heard it somewhere. Then it hit Charles Brant, the new contractor working on the old boathouse near Pine Lake. I picked up my keys. If Laura's last transaction was with him, I needed to know why. The boathouse was dark when I arrived, the lake eerily calm under the moonlight. My flashlight swept across old lumber, tools, and a faint glint of something metallic near the dock. I knelt, paint flakes, metallic blue, just like the ones under Laura's nails. Detective Monroe. The voice came from behind me. I spun around, my hand instinctively going for my gun. Charles Brant stood there mid-40s, broad-shouldered, face roughened by years of outdoor work. He looked startled but calm, too calm. Didn't mean to scare you, he said, raising his hands slightly. Heard someone snooping around. I'm investigating a murder, I said flatly. Laura Kane. His face shifted just barely. The lady from the antique store. Tragic. You knew her. Bought a jewelry box from her yesterday, that's all. I shone my light across his hands. Tiny blue flecks of paint clung to his fingers. Nice color. I said quietly, matches the ones found on her body. He froze, just for a second, then he smiled. Guess I used the same paint on the boathouse. Coincidence, detective. I didn't believe him. As I drove away, the cold wind off Pine Lake seemed to whisper something I couldn't quite catch, a name, maybe, or a warning. But one thing was certain. This case had just opened its first dark door. Morning came gray and heavy, the kind of sky that felt like wet paper pressed against the earth. I'd barely slept. My mind kept looping back to Charles Brant, his calm, measured voice, those blue paint flecks on his hands, and that almost imperceptible twitch when I mentioned Laura's name. At the station, Sheriff Dalton was already waiting with 2 coffees. He looked like he'd aged 5 years overnight. Lab confirmed it. He said, handing me the cup. Paint under Laura Kane's nails matches the metallic coating used on Brant's boathouse project. I set the cup down slowly, so he struggled with her. Maybe. But it's not enough for a warrant yet. Brant's got an alibi, says he was working late at the docks. His assistant backed him up. I stared at the evidence board. Laura's photo sat in the center, pale face, lifeless eyes. That red coat burned into my mind. Around her I'd pinned names. Melissa Kane missing, Charles Brant contractor, unknown motive. That was what didn't fit. What we know about Laura's sister? I asked. Melissa disappeared 3 years ago, right? Dalton nodded. Yup. Search teams combed half the county. No trace. Case went cold. You think it's connected? Laura had that scar. I said. Same one mentioned in the old missing persons file. Same family. And if she started digging into her sister's case again? Dalton sighed. You think someone silenced her? I didn't answer. The silence between us was enough. I drove out to Kane's Curios again that afternoon, this time with a search warrant. The shop felt colder than before, the air thick with the smell of dust and old varnish. Behind the counter, I opened the ledger again. Laura's handwriting was neat, careful, but at the very back, tucked between 2 blank pages, I found a folded note. It read, "He knows what happened to her. Meet me by the lake after closing." No date, no name, but he could only be one person, Brant. I bagged the note and kept going through the drawers. In one, hidden beneath receipts, was a small, tarnished silver locket. Inside was a photograph, two girls laughing, arms around each other, Laura and Melissa, but behind the photo there was something else, a piece of folded paper, yellowed with age. It was a letter. Laura, if you ever find this, don't go near him. He isn't who he says he is. I saw something I shouldn't have. I'm scared. Please, don't tell anyone. Love, M. I stared at it for a long time. Melissa's handwriting, so she had known something, and whatever it was, it had cost her life. I found Brant later that day near the boathouse, hammering a plank into place like nothing in the world was wrong. His hands were steady, his expression unreadable. Morning, detective, he said without looking up. Back again, just following up. Still think I killed that woman. I didn't answer. Instead, I pulled the letter from my coat pocket. Recognize this? He glanced at it. Should I? It was hidden inside Laura's shop. Her sister wrote it, the one who vanished 3 years ago. He kept hammering. Clack, 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 Melissa. He said finally, voice low, sweet kid. Came around sometimes, asking questions she shouldn't. About what? He shrugged. People, deals, secrets. Small towns have plenty. I stepped closer. You knew her, didn't you? He looked at me then, and for a heartbeat his eyes went dark, not angry, not frightened, just cold. Everyone knew everyone here, detective. You should remember that. A threat disguised as a statement. By evening, I was sitting in my car outside the lake, the wind slicing through the trees. I was waiting, watching. That's when I saw movement, a woman's silhouette walking along the far path toward the old cabins. She was small, bundled in a long coat. Not Laura, obviously, but something about the stride caught my attention. Familiar. I got out quietly, my boots crunching on the frost. Hello. I called, the figure froze, then turned, and I saw her face. It was Lydia Crane, Laura's neighbor. She ran the diner in town, always cheerful, always gossiping. Detective Monroe, she said nervously, you scared me half to death. What are you doing out here? I come out sometimes after work, to think. She twisted her hands together. You're investigating Laura's death, right? Yes. Did you know her well? We were friends, she said quickly. Too quickly. I told the sheriff already. She came by the diner a few days ago, said she'd found something about her sister. What kind of something? She didn't say, just that she was finally close to the truth. My pulse quickened. Did she mention who she was meeting that night? Lydia hesitated. No, but she seemed scared, said she couldn't trust the police. That stung. I'd heard that before. Why would she say that? Lydia looked down at the ground. Because 3 years ago, when Melissa disappeared, she'd filed a report saying someone from the sheriff's office told her to drop it, that it was a private matter. My breath caught. Who? She didn't name him. Just said he wore a badge. Back at the station, I went through the old missing persons file again. The officer who handled it, Deputy Randall Moore. He'd since been promoted and was now working directly under Sheriff Dalton. My mind reeled. Dalton. He'd been first on scene this morning. He'd insisted on keeping the press quiet. He'd brushed off the sisters' connection like it was nothing. Could he have? I stopped myself. Dalton had been my mentor when I joined Pinewood PD. He'd taught me half of what I knew. The thought of him being involved felt wrong, but my gut said otherwise. I decided to dig deeper. I waited until the station emptied out, then slipped into the archive room. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I flipped through the old logs. Then I found a report from April 2022, filed under Melissa Kane, last known location, Brant's Boathouse. Final witness statement, Sheriff Dalton present on site, and scrawled at the bottom in faint pencil, almost erased, were the words, case closed, insufficient evidence. Confidential, confidential, that word hit like a bullet. Dalton had been there, he'd known about Melissa, and he'd buried the file. I didn't sleep that night either. Instead, I sat in my car outside Dalton's house, engine off, hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles whitened. His porch light glowed through the fog like a sickly lantern. If he'd killed Melissa, and now Laura, then what the hell had I been working beside all these years? A buzz from my phone broke the silence, a message, unknown number. You're getting too close. Stop digging or you'll end up in the lake too. I stared at it for a long time, then glanced toward the still, dark water beyond the trees. Pine Lake, the town's quiet heart, the graveyard for its secrets, and I had a feeling it wasn't done taking bodies yet. I didn't go to the station the next morning, not after that message. Instead, I drove aimlessly through the fog-drenched streets of Pinewood, trying to quiet the storm in my head. Every turn, every face I passed looked different, now blurred by suspicion. Sheriff Dalton, my mentor, my friend, could he really have buried a murder? And if he had, what did Charles Brandt have to do with it? By the time I reached the lake, the mist was so thick I could barely see 10 feet ahead. The air was sharp and metallic, like the world was holding its breath. I parked by the old dock, the same one where Laura's body had been found. The water was perfectly still, reflecting the gray sky like a cracked mirror. That's when I saw him, Dalton, standing at the edge of the pier, his figure a dark blur against the morning fog. I stepped out, my gun holstered but ready. You out here early, Sheriff. He turned, his eyes calm too calm. Could say the same about you, Claire. Couldn't sleep. I said, been thinking about Laura and her sister. He studied me for a long moment. You're chasing ghosts, kid. Melissa Kane disappeared years ago. We searched for weeks. You know that? I know the report said that. I replied evenly, but I also know you were there the night she went missing. Something flickered across his face, anger, fear, maybe guilt. It was gone before I could name it. You should go home, he said quietly. You're tired. You've been working this case too close. Too close, I repeated. That's what you told Laura, isn't it, when she came to you about her sister? His jaw tightened. She found something. I continued, taking a step closer. She met someone that night. A man who promised her answers, and then she ended up in the lake, the same way her sister did. He looked away, out across the water. You don't know what you're talking about. I found the letter. I said, Melissa's warning. She was scared. She wrote that he isn't who he says he is. She meant you, didn't she? Dalton's shoulders stiffened. Careful, Claire. You covered it up. You told everyone it was a missing persons case, but you knew she was dead. You knew where to hide the body, Pine Lake deep enough to bury the truth. He turned suddenly, eyes flashing. You don't understand what she was into. I froze. What do you mean? She wasn't innocent. He hissed. Neither of them were. They were blackmailing people, men from this town, good men threatening to ruin their lives if they didn't pay up. I tried to warn her, but she wouldn't stop. So you killed her. I didn't mean to. He snapped. We argued near the dock. She slipped, hit her head on the rocks. I panicked. I couldn't let it destroy everything I built here. The words hung between us, heavy, poisonous. My voice came out low, cold. And Laura? He hesitated, then looked down at the water. She came to me last week. Said she knew the truth, said she had proof. I tried to talk her out of it, to make her understand, but she threatened to go to the state police. So you killed her too. He closed his eyes. It was an accident. He whispered, just like before. I just wanted her to stop. I stared at him, the man I'd trusted for 15 years, the man who'd taught me how to see through lies, and now he stood there confessing, not to the world, but to me. You buried both of them, I said quietly. You buried them in this lake and thought the water would wash you clean. Dalton's voice broke. You think I wanted this. I tried to protect this town. I gave my life to it. No, I said, you gave it death. Before I could move, Dalton's hand went to his gun. Reflex, panic. I drew mine instantly, the sound echoing across the empty lake. Don't do it. I warned, don't make me. He didn't point it at me. Instead, he looked down at the water, at the reflection of himself staring back. I already did. He whispered, and then he dropped the weapon into the lake. It sank with a small, final splash. Hours later, Dalton sat in the interrogation room, wrists cuffed, face pale and drawn. The confession had been recorded, word for word. He didn't ask for a lawyer, didn't look at me. When the deputies led him away, I watched from behind the glass. For a second, I thought I saw the man I'd known, the one who took me under his wing when I was a rookie. But that man was gone, drowned somewhere under Pine Lake. Charles Brandt had been right about one thing: small towns have plenty of secrets, but they always float to the surface eventually. That evening, I went back to the lake one last time. The fog had lifted and the water shimmered gold under the setting sun. I stood at the dock, the same one where it had all begun, and let the silence settle around me. Somewhere beneath that calm surface lay the ghosts of Laura and Melissa Kane, two sisters who tried to speak the truth. I pulled the silver locket from my coat pocket, the one I'd taken from Laura's shop. Inside, their smiling faces still looked so alive. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "You deserved better." I tossed the locket into the lake. It disappeared with barely a ripple. For the first time in weeks, the water was still. I turned and walked back toward my car, the wind rustling through the trees behind me. Justice wasn't perfect. It never was. But for Pinewood, for those two women, it was finally enough. And as the town lights flickered in the distance, I knew one thing for certain. No matter how deep the water, the truth always rises. Please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.